Somalia might be the last place you'd expect to find Jews. But in 2007, a young Somali man began emailing a Jewish woman in Minnesota. He wrote about lighting his menorah, wishing strangers Shabbat Shalom, being a Jew surrounded by people who hated him. For 3 years, they exchanged messages, bound by a fragile, flickering Jewish connection. And then, silence. No goodbye, no warning, just gone. Suddenly, the story of Somali Jews felt even more mysterious. Was it all just a hoax? Or have Jews been here all along, hiding in plain sight? For those whose knowledge of Somalia begins and ends with this guy,
I'm the captain now.
I'm happy to let you know that there's a lot more to Somalia. For example, there's a lot of political drama in Somalia. So much drama that they made a movie about it. Black Hawk Down is actually based on the Battle of Mogadishu, which is part of the Somali Civil War. The Civil War began in the 90s and was fought between the weakening Somali government and insurgent groups. In that time, a terrorist organization known as Al-Shabaab was born and remains active to this day. Al-Shabaab plays a major role in that 3-year stretch of emails between the young Somali man and his Jewish psychoanalyst pen pal. He would write often about bombings, attacks, and gunfire that his city of Mogadishu experienced due to the malicious clashes with the Somali government. So how did the young Somali man and the Jewish psychoanalyst even come to know each other? In 2007, Dr. Nancy Hartevelt Kobrin was living in Minnesota when she saw an article in the Jerusalem Post about a guy named Rami and his mother Ashira. The article mentioned Rami's blog, which he started to get the word out about the violence that had overtaken his hometown.
He was all alone at the age of 19 with his widowed mother, and the forces of Al-Shabaab and Mogadishu and this part of Somalia being very unstable were sort of closing in on them.
Rami wanted readers to know the real story about what life was like for someone who was living smack in the middle of so much brutality. But he didn't just want readers to focus on the fighting and the danger and the negativity. He wanted to show what it looked like for someone just trying to have a normal life. The only thing was, Rami and his mother were Jewish. And in Mogadishu, that's anything but normal. Primarily because Somalia claims that it's almost entirely Muslim. Only about a handful of Jewish families are estimated to still live in Somalia. And they certainly aren't public about it. They observe their faith as crypto-Jews, where they appear Muslim on the surface, but practice their Judaism secretly for fear of discrimination, harassment, or worse. But have Jews always been this scarce and unwelcome in Somalia?
It was easy to overlook this simple question, were there Jews there? And when you begin to sort of scratch the surface, more pieces of Jewish history begin to surface.
Back in 1900, a couple hundred Jews moved to Somalia as traders and settled into the coastal towns. And all was pretty harmonious until 1967. Over the course of a 6-day war, Israel fought a coalition of Arab states, which is the side Somalia aligned itself with. Because of that, Somalia deported all of its Jews from Mogadishu. Some went to Israel and some went to Kenya. But the big takeaway was that none were welcome to stay. In the 1970s, the Muslim Brotherhood arrived in Somalia. And soon after, Somalia officially joined the Arab League and declared itself 100% Muslim. As a response to this hostility and erasure, Somalis with even a hint of Jewish ancestry were reluctant to claim it, like the Hebrew tribe. Somalia subscribes to the tribe or clan system, which you could think of like social groups of a high school. There are the jock or cheerleading tribes, which are the cool tribes. And then there are the nerd or theater kid tribes, which are the less cool tribes. The Yibur is probably the least cool tribe in all of Somalia. They're like the math club in high school, and they're treated as such. They're often discriminated against and aren't even allowed to own land, which keeps them very poor. According to some, this discrimination is all because they were once Hebrews, way back in the 13th century. And even though they converted to Islam hundreds of years ago, they're still treated like second class. Because of this extreme mistreatment, it's no surprise that they like to keep their possible Hebraic heritage in the past. In Somalia, when it comes to being Jewish, denial is the name of the game. Which is what made Rami's blog so special. There he was, someone who should have kept quiet about his faith, writing in vivid detail about what it was like to be Jewish in Somalia. He needed to tell people exactly who he was, even if those around him didn't want to hear it.
He was 19, and 19-year-olds, they have a need to assert themselves and claim their identity.
Rami wrote, "The hardest thing in my life is being Jewish in a city where 99% of the people are Muslim. Living as a Jewish person is not easy. I am surrounded by Muslim people all the time. Some are nice, and some are full of hate." Predictably, he received lots of hateful messages on his blog, but that didn't stop him. In his own words, he said, "I want to write so much and tell so much, but I am afraid. I don't want to put my life in danger and my mother's too. Maybe it is hard to understand, but living in a country where life has no meaning, then it is only you who knows the meaning of your life." Rami knew the meaning of his life was to be a beacon of truth, pride, and hope. But when he started writing, he had no idea his words would travel halfway around the world. With her background as a psychological trauma and counterterrorism expert, Rami's story resonated with Dr. Kobrin. And as a Jew living in Minnesota, which ironically was the recruitment ground for Al-Shabaab in the US, she was more familiar with the group than most.
I was really fascinated when I learned about this young kid coming out of the closet, blogging that he was Jewish in Mogadishu.
And so, after reading his blog, she sent him an email. A friendship blossomed as Rami offered Nancy a portal into his mysterious world. And Nancy gave Rami a welcome outlet for venting. They talk about all sorts of things, from lighthearted subjects such as his interest in the environment to his love of Tom and Jerry, while Nancy told him all about her ballet classes, the birth of her grandkids, and her thoughts on the movie Superbad. But they also spoke of heavier topics. Rami shared how the war destroyed parts of Mogadishu University, the isolation he felt being the only Jew besides his mother, and the bombings that destroyed a local milk factory. Nancy sent numerous refugee resources to help Rami and Ashira escape Mogadishu for Israel or America, but they were reluctant to leave the only home they had ever known.
It was extremely difficult for his mom to think of leaving Mogadishu. She did not want to do it. And we kept on telling him, you must prepare your mother to leave at some point. The situation is dire and is just not safe for you. And the reason why she didn't want to leave is that the family graves were there. And it was so painful for her to think of parting, sort of the ultimate physical departure from her deceased husband and his uncle and her parents.
In April 2010, Rami wrote to Nancy that he and his mother had finally left Mogadishu and relocated to Yemen. Nancy responded, but never heard back. Numerous attempts at trying to reach Rami were met with silence, and so she finally decided to publish their emails in 2017 because she realized Rami's emails were essentially the only extant documents of the last remnant of contemporary Jews in Somalia. In the wake of Rami's silence, Nancy no doubt asked herself what we're all thinking. Was Rami even real to begin with? According to Nancy, all signs point to yes, because, quote, Rami knew way too much about Judaism to not be Jewish. In fact, what she remembers most from their conversation is how impressed she was by how they maintained their faith.
They had a Torah scroll, and Rami told me that it was so faded, the letters, that he knew that it was not permissible to fill the letters in. Yet this Torah scroll was obviously the most precious sacred object for them that they held dearly.
Still, skepticism remains. Due to lack of concrete evidence, and by Nancy's own assertion, unlike neighboring Ethiopia, there is essentially no Jewish community in Somalia. So that makes proving the existence of crypto-Jews in Somalia difficult. That being said, whether Jews are 1 or 1 million, we persist. Who among us hasn't felt othered or ostracized at some point because of who we are or what we believe? And yet, we've never let that stop us. Our rarity is our superpower. And just because we aren't yet aware of Somalia's Jewish history doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's entirely possible that evidence of Jews who once lived in Somalia is waiting for the moment to reveal itself.
He's probably not in Yemen. I hope not. But I also hope that he's off somewhere and that his mom is still well and they're living a quiet life.
Thanks to Dr. Kobrin, Rami and Ashira's story will continue to shine. and may one day help illuminate that hidden chapter of Somali history. This could be a story of catfishing, but if it's not, it might just be one of the coolest untold stories of Jewish history.